Well, welcome to another session with the Church Guy and the Addict. I'm Don and I'm the Church Guy.
Hello, everybody. I'm Danny and I'm the addict.
Hey, Danny, how you doing, buddy?
Fine, thank you. And yourself?
Good. I don't think we've chatted since before Christmas.
That's right. So we apologize, but we've been both very busy. So it's hard for our schedules to be coincide, I guess.
You had a good
Coincide.
you had a good Christmas, Danny?
It was nice. Yes.
Yeah.
Very grateful. And yourself?
Yeah, we had a great time. Went with the grandkids and everything.
Nice.
But Danny, we're going to get started here. We got an email that we got to deal with, and it's kind of a question to you. He doesn't
Okay.
say definitely, but when you hear the email, you'll see that he's kind of asking, this question goes to you. So the email says, I am a church guy / Christian and have been in a relationship with several addicts over the years. So he says, what is the question? What are the frustrations that a person in recovery might have with me? What are the things that I do that might bother you, hinder you, or even distract you from getting well? Billy J.
Okay.
That's a loaded question, hey, Danny?
Yeah, and there'll be a lot of answers to that. And I mean, I can't diagnose all of the issues, if you will, but first thing I would say that might hinder is, if the person needs to go to meetings, and as we've been on our many episodes that we've talked about that, knowing the Bible is great, but it's not going to keep you sober, if you're an addict or an alcoholic, first off. So, you need that freedom to be able to go to meetings or that time, whereas, because of the second wave, meetings are all shut down. So there's Zoom time, so you got to respect that the person needs Zoom time, as well as, the other thing I can't help but think of, and I mean, we just talked about Christmas, many families still have met through this virus, if you will. And as for us, we couldn't because our family's from Toronto, both of us. And so, as we know, it's a red zone. But anyway, when you're with family, be it birthdays, Christmas, holidays, whatever, there's a lot of members who are drinking and or using drugs, because today pot's legal, right? So, but my point is, it's difficult for a person who's living in recovery to, be around a social event where there's a lot of drinking and carrying on going on. And then you're wondering, why does the person seem a little off? Because, the person wants to go home or, it's one thing to have normal drinking, if you will, where someone has a glass of wine with their dinner, but there are some families that have beer after beer after beer or wine after wine after wine. And yeah, it makes it difficult for the person who's trying to live in recovery to be around all that,
Right. So let's go back to the question for a second. He's saying, what are the frustrations that, say, you, Danny, would have with some of the church people? So he's identified himself as a church guy / Christian. Can you think of things that irk you, things that Christian people do, maybe that affect your sobriety? So an example would be maybe, one thing you mentioned is person's just maybe always Bible thumping. So they're not giving enough respect to your recovery through the program. They're putting more emphasis, I guess is what you were saying, they give more emphasis to biblical practices than the disciplines of the AA. That's kind of what you were saying. But are there other things that you can think of that you sort of, so when I think of myself, the church guy, I think, fairly naive to some of the things that you would experience, some of the things that you go through. So I might do things that would actually hurt your recovery. I mean, you mentioned maybe drinking around you or having a party where there's a lot of drinking. But are there other things that kind of irk you about church people?
Well, I would say primarily it would be more of the talk that, if Dan had enough willpower, he would be able to stop drinking, which leads us to alcoholism is a disease.
Hmm.
It's a disease of the mind, the body, and the soul. And the minute, see, a normal guy like yourself would have a glass of wine and feel a little, oh, I'm feeling this wine. It's very strong. I better stop. Whereas an alcoholic has a total opposite effect, because the minute they have that alcohol in them and they feel a little woof, they're like, oh, giddy up, let's go.
Hmm.
So what develops is what they call the phenomenon of craving, right? The phenomenon
Hmm.
of craving. So when that happens, you to an alcoholic, they just can't stop.
Hmm.
It's like having one chip and putting that away and say, oh, that's enough. Or one bite of a cookie and saying, oh, that's enough. Because something happens to us that the minute we have alcohol in our system, all we want is more, 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 more.
Well, Danny, we
You
were
know.
we were going to we were going to talk about that on a program. Whether alcoholism was a disease, because that's a big question. Do you want to dive into that right now, or do you want to save that for another episode?
Well, basically, it's well, it's up to you. I mean, I figure since we're here, we might as well, hit the ball out of the park, I guess. But you know, um,
Because
you
that's a
know,
tough one. Friends of mine just refuse to accept that alcoholism is a disease. They say no, it's a decision. And I admit that it's a challenge for me as well. I think, if it's a disease, I think you have more empathy for somebody who's going through a disease. But if you think, well, this is just a decision this person is making, then it's hard to feel compassion for that person. I mean, I think I've come around to believe that it is a disease, but I'd like to hear your argument for it even further.
okay. Well, if you think about it, it, um, when we talk about a disease, like for instance, if someone had cancer, um, A, it's no fault of their own, right? But
Right.
B, it's something that, people would say, oh, poor Johnny has got cancer.
Right.
But now, if we spun that, because see, since 1972, they've figured out that alcoholism is a disease of the mind, the body, and the soul. And what I mean exactly by that is that if you think of an alcoholic, for instance, right? you know, um, Over time, they don't just become an alcoholic off one drink. I mean, over time, they've drank and they've got drunk and they've gotten in trouble, and life's kind of spiraled out of control. But see, a disease, addiction is a disease, whether no matter how you look at it or not. And simply put, is that the minute an alcoholic has some alcohol in them, and it doesn't matter, someone might have 30 years of sobriety and put alcohol in themselves, and they're just as drunk as they used to be before they stopped drinking, you
Mm.
know, because once again, it opens up that phenomenal craving and the compulsion in the mind to drink. I need a drink. I need a drink, because now you've put that in you, and it's woken up this Pandora's box, and that you want to drink, and no human power can help you. This is something that God's got to help you with. You know, uh, but I mean, don't get me wrong. Humans do. God puts humans in my life to have helped me to be where I'm at today. So please don't get me
Yep.
wrong when I say that. But what I'm trying to say is you can lock up an alcoholic for 10 years in a jail, but the minute he gets out, he's going to want to drink. So we call that untreated alcoholism. You know. But
Mm.
getting back to the question of disease, and this is the cycle of addiction. Okay. Now, if you're an alcoholic, you're shaky, you're sick. Just think of your worst flu. And if you drink, you'll feel better. So that's what he does or she does. They
Mm.
drink, they feel better. And because they feel better, they continue drinking. And so now it's like, oh my God, I feel so great. I'm not sick no more. Um, life's troubles, be it lost a job, lost a wife, whatever. It just makes life more compatible. And
Because
you know
you're,
what? Alcohol has become your savior, has become your higher power, has become, your everything. So your breath of fresh air, if you will,
yeah,
and then it turns around, and then you get totally drunk, let's say, then you go to bed or pass out, whichever. And then the next morning, the same thing happens again. You wake up, you're sick. And the only thing to cure your sickness is more alcohol or drugs, whatever your issues
mm,
are, you know? So, yeah, I would say to myself and to yourself and who's ever listening, yeah, it's a disease. And like I said, some might feel compassion for someone with cancer, but someone who's a drug addict or an alcoholic, it's like, oh, look what they did to themselves, you know? And alcohol is the great eraser of pain because it makes you not care. Like me, let's face it, we have a lot of people with mental issues today. Doctors have no problem prescribing medicine that might zombie somebody out.
mm,
I've seen people that, doctor prescribed stuff that are standing there with drool just falling down their mouth because they're zombied right out.
yeah,
No different than someone who's drinking. Same thing. Only the medicine or the cure, if you will, is different, right?
mm.
And
So,
let's face it, someone who has cancer goes to chemo for recovery, right? Someone who's got issues with addiction goes to meetings.
mm.
And that's the chemo, if you will.
So you say that there was, the discovery was through medical science that alcoholism was a disease, and this was in the 70s that that proclamation was made. So if you go to your
Well,
doctor,
well,
that's
well.
in,
Actually, Don, can I interrupt for 1 second?
yeah,
I'm just gonna find my glasses here just for 1 second. But I'm reading from the book of Alcoholics Anonymous right now, and this was written by Dr. Silkworth. Okay, and this was in 19. The AA started in 1935. Okay, and I believe the book was written in 39, if I'm not mistaken. But either way, this is what the doctor says. He says, in his statement, he confirms that we have suffered alcoholic torture, must believe that the body of the alcoholic is quite as abnormal as his mind. The doctor's theory, the doctor's theory that we have an allergy to alcohol interests us,
mm,
and then it goes on to say that after they've succumbed to the desire again, as so many do, the phenomenon of craving develops, and they pass through the well-known stages of a spree, emerging remorseful, but a firm resolution not to drink again. This
mm.
is repeated over and over again, unless this person can experience an entire psychic change, which is the mind. There is very little hope for his recovery.
Mm.
You know,
So
and that
did it say that it's an allergy? That a person, an alcoholic has an allergy to, is allergic to alcohol?
exactly. And this was the AA movement started in 35.
Mm,
And that was his he was one of the first doctors to treat alcoholism. Because you got to remember, what they used to do with alcoholics and addicts is just throw them in the mental ward. We can't help them. Every time
mm,
we let him out, he drinks, he gets drunk, and we can't do nothing for him. So they just put them in the mental wards.
mm.
And whereas this doctor has found, because he's worked with a lot of alcoholics, and this was in 1935, he discovered this.
Mm. I mean, it's easier to have compassion for people if you think this is a disease they're dealing with. But a lot of people that I know, they might, say, okay, it's a disease, but the person has a choice. And the person has made the decision to take that first drink. I guess it'd be like, well, I'm allergic to alcohol, but I'm still going to have a drink. It'd be like the guy who's allergic to bees, but he doesn't stay away from bees.
Or someone who's allergic to, who has an eating disorder.
Hmm.
you know, who's eating a Big Mac, you know.
But it makes them sick.
Well, that's right. And
So
by the way, it's 1939 this book was written. I just
1939,
wanted to clarify that. Sorry.
yeah. So if you
But
go to a
yes,
doctor, if you go to a doctor today and tell him you're an alcoholic, how is he going to deal with your condition?
well, let's put it this way. If someone's a diabetic,
Yeah,
how many people eat candies who are diabetic? Drink soda pop who are diabetic, right?
okay, so that sort of opens up a bit of a discussion, because if you say, well, okay, the diabetic who doesn't respect the diet that his doctor has prescribed um, is responsible for going into, you know, shock or insulin shock or whatever diabetic terminology is. They're going to have a reaction to eating the sugar or taking their insulin when it's required. So where does the responsibility fall on the alcoholic then? Is there not, it's too bad there wasn't a medication that an alcoholic could take to
There is.
fix the
There
problem.
is.
There is.
There is. It's called AA. It's called another alcoholic working with another alcoholic. Because let's face it, Don, let's just spin this right up like to everybody. How many people are overweight? How many people say, well, I should lose 10, 15, 20, 30, how many pounds they feel they should lose, but yet they're eating the stuff they're not supposed to eat. Oh, I'll treat myself today. I was so good. I'll have a chocolate bar, or I'll have a pizza, or I'll have, come on, Don. The world is full of addiction, whether you look at it anywhere or not.
Yeah.
How many people got to go? I live on a street where I see people walking, whether it's minus 20 or plus 20, because this is like their exercise, right? Because they're eating wrong. So they gotta, or maybe not even eating wrong. They want to stay healthy, right? So just like an alcoholic, they want to stay healthy, right? So if you got a little bit of sobriety and you want to stay healthy, you got to be around other alcoholics. You got to go to meetings. You got to Zoom meetings. You got to talk to people on the phone. You got to have some inspiration, if you will, right? And it's just like we can't do it alone, but alone we can't do it.
Yeah.
So if an alcoholic or an addict is speaking to another alcoholic or an addict, we speak the same language. We understand. You know, like if someone's learning who's a and this often makes me laugh, but anyway, an addiction counselor who's not an addict or an alcoholic, what do they truly know about losing it all? You know, maybe on page 92 it teaches you something about losing it all, but they have no idea about losing it all. But if someone who's a fellow alcoholic who spoke with me and I can tell them about what they felt like losing it all, and they can share with me, we're speaking the same language because we know exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah.
We feel each other's pain. It's just like if someone's husband died, who's better to talk to someone other than someone else, another widow whose husband passed, and she can help that new widow along her journey of recovery, right? Because we're all in recovery, whether you look at it or not. Some choose to ignore it, some choose not to.
Well, Danny, why are some people so against, some alcoholics, some addicts are so against the 12-step or the AA program?
Because they don't want to get well, Don. They don't want to get well. It's that simple. There's millions and millions and millions of people around the world who are living happy, joyous, and free from alcohol and drugs by this beautiful, beautiful program. And those who struggle with AA and 12 steps and blah, 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 those people, they're not transparent, Don. They're not transparent. They don't want to say, they don't want to do what is required for people to do. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, it's a good commercial for AA there, Danny.
Well, I'm not trying to advertise anything. All I'm trying to do is tell you what worked for me and what's worked for millions of people around the world. And like I said, this book was written in 39. The first 164 pages of this book has not changed. The only
Okay,
thing
so,
that's changed is the stories in the back of the book.
okay, so then let me ask
Yeah.
you this, Danny, if you're an addict and you believe you have a disease, so then is it your fault if you go and you go out and use?
If you know you have a problem,
Yeah, if you know you accept, like, I have a disease, like I have cancer, nothing I can do about it.
but
Like,
there is something
whose
you can
fault is
do.
it if they
It,
if
it,
they pick up?
it could be arrested. The disease can be arrested, is the best way I can put that. And pointing fingers, whose fault, no fault, it doesn't matter. It's like someone overweight. If they're eating 3 pizzas a day, whose fault is it? Now put them in a community together with someone like Overeaters Anonymous. Put them together with a person like that, and they can talk to other people who understand their struggles. Like, addiction is about pain, Don. Let's face it. Okay, we all have some sort of pains in our life, and the way we hide or journey through our pain is some have alcohol, some have drugs, some have food, some have spending, some have sex, some throw themselves into the Bible thinking that everything's going to be hunky-dory. And the greatest part of a 12-step fellowship, Don, is we're real. See, you go to church. Think about this, Don. How many times have you been to church? Don't answer the question. Many times, right? Is what I'm saying, right? But how many people do you know, let's say Frank, for instance, is going through something really bad, be it his kids died, his wife's leaving him, lost his job, whatever. How you doing, Frank? Oh, I'm okay. I'm okay. They're phony, is what I'm trying to say. It's phony. You know the truth when you know, how you doing, Frank? And Frank is not doing well. What's he going to tell you? Well, I'm okay. And I'm not saying AA is a place where people whine about their problems. That's not what I'm saying. It's a place that we could share a problem, and just sharing the problem, half the problem's gone. And you share that with your sponsor or some mentor that you have in AA that you look up to, and you feel safe that you could share this burden with them and they won't tell nobody. Or you think about an AA meeting, Don, where someone stands up in the front of the room and talks about what it was like, what happened, and what it's like today. That's honesty. A lot of people can't get up there and talk truth about where they have done wrong in their life, where they failed, But because of the 12 steps, there's grace, there's forgiveness, and there's self-forgiveness, which is the most important thing,
Danny, we've used up all our time. Can we come back and do a part 2 on this?
Sure.
Because I think we're right into the thick of it there, and I don't want to move on to something else. We'll combine this fellow's email and the disease aspect in our next program. Does that work for you?
Works for me.
So in the meantime, make sure you click on and go to the next one. It'll be part 2 of maybe we'll call this Is Addiction a Disease? Part 2. And in the meantime, if you have any questions for us, send your questions to thechurchguyandtheaddict@gmail.com, and Danny and I'll answer your questions in one of our shows. Okay, Danny, so we'll talk to you a little later, and we'll carry on this conversation. God
Okay.
bless.
God bless.